Uh, Thank you, Dave. So my name is Drew. I'm a success coach. I handle employer relations and stuff like that. But today I'll also be facilitating, talking to you guys a bit about what sexual harassment is, what discrimination in the workplace is, and just trying to facilitate discussions on what you guys should be expecting out of the workplace and all of that. Our guest facilitator today, we're very lucky to have him here, is Joe Cooling. He is a human resources generalist at University of Michigan's College of Literature, Science, and the Arts. He does a lot of great work there, and he'll be talking to you today as well. And so, yeah, if Lexi could pull up the slides, we'll get into it. Perfect. So yeah, I'm going to hand it off to Joe real quick to discuss our objectives today.
Thanks, Drew. Hi, everyone. First of all, thanks for giving me some of your time today. With everything happening, time is really valuable, right? Time to process however we need to process, time to talk with loved ones. I do just want to name up front, as Jordan and Zoe and Drew talked about, we're going to be talking about some topics that are going to hit us in different ways. I want to name the fact that I'm a white dude, right? I'm going to be talking about some things pertaining to discrimination, harm, what we can do to make sure that we can have the workplace that we want. But I just want to get it out of the way that, I'm not going to have the same set of experiences as everyone in this room. And we're all going to experience what's happening right now, as well as what happens at work differently. So to repeat, however you can engage with this, we really appreciate it. I want to hear your voices and hear your thoughts and see your reactions, and do what works for you. So to talk about our objectives for today, hopefully by the end of the day, you should be able to confidently say all of these things. I can define what an ideal workplace environment is. We don't always have to completely be able to understand why something doesn't feel right in the moment, but we should be able to know for ourselves and for what we know, what is a good workplace, an ideal workplace feel like, and we're going to talk about that. I can define what sexual harassment and racial discrimination is and what my role is in stopping these situations and maintaining an inclusive and equitable workplace. There's a lot of things that we can call harassment and discrimination. We're going to talk about just what some of those behaviors are, what some of those actions are that we are going to see and try to address. And hopefully when you finish up today, you can be able to say that's discrimination or that's harassment, at least at a surface level. I can define what is expected of me in the workplace. We're going to talk about just some general expectations. I started working when I was 15 at a place called Culver's. Most of you have probably eaten at a Culver's before. I still think it's the best burger you can get. That's even half fast food, right? But back when I started working when I was 15, there were a lot of things that people just didn't tell me, right? Like my job had an onboarding. I talked with my boss and some things I figured out along the way, and hopefully we're going to be able to tell you some things that some of us wish we would have known before we started our first job. And then I can define what the process is for reporting inappropriate behavior in the workplace. So when we talk about harassment, when we talk about discrimination, when we see something happen, when we experience something, we want to know what we can do with that information. And sometimes it's not super clear, but we're going to talk through some of that stuff too. And finally, I can identify strategies for intervening in instances of workplace misconduct and for addressing harm. So when we see something happening, what are we doing about it? There's reporting, and then there's intervening, and we're going to talk about both of those.
All right. Oh, yeah, so with these objectives in mind, we want to start out today with just the basic question, what do you want out of your workplace? And we'll have several different ways that you can respond here. You can either verbalize your response, you can put it in the chat, or now I just dropped a link in the chat. You can go to that link and it'll allow you to enter like three words that you think of for what you want from your workplace. So please, like, that's my question. What do you want from your workplace? You have several different ways to respond to that. So yeah, have at it.
Also, if it's any easier, you can go to that website at the top of the screen and then just type in this little code. But either way, it doesn't matter.
It looks like we already got some responses. Yep, mentorship. Yeah, definitely. And you'll actually get some of that with this program. Safety, yes, that's something that we're gonna talk about in more detail coming up here. Yep, empathy. Yeah, it is nice to have supervisors and bosses that are empathetic. I am lucky enough to have supervisors like that. Jordan and Zoe, thank you very much. Let's see, what else we got here? Positive attitude, friendship. Yeah, these are all structure. Structure is a nice one. That's a very mature answer. Yeah, that's a good one. Oh, they're starting to get smaller, but let's see. Acceptance, understanding, inclusion. That's another one that we're going to cover too. You guys are getting ahead of me. But yeah, basically, like, what we're trying to get at is what you want from your workplace is just to have it be a safe place where you can work at your best, right? So now with the next slide, Lexi, you can get back to it. I'll go into what that looks like. So thank you guys for participating in the word cloud. Much appreciated. Okay, so just what you should expect. Let's see. So yeah, the first thing, your workplace should be inclusive. So it should be one where everyone feels as if they are an important member of the team. It should also be equitable. That means that everyone's being put in a position to succeed. And to explain this a little more, we have a graphic on the right here. And now feel free to still participate in the chat, talking about what the differences are between these pictures. But the one on the top depicts equality. So everyone is getting the same bike, right? They're getting the same equipment. So in theory, that's fair, but everyone has different needs. So as you can see on the bottom, everyone is able to participate because they have something that better suits their needs, right? That's what equity is. You want a workplace where if you need accommodations, and then just in general, everyone feels as if they have a chance to work to the best of their ability. And then also your workplace should be safe. Especially if you're working a job that is physical labor, say roofing or anything of that nature that's kind of dangerous. You want your supervisors to put you in a position that's safe in general. And that goes for jobs that aren't just strictly physical labor as well. But yeah. So yeah, just to review real quick, you want a workplace that you should expect a workplace that is inclusive, equitable, and safe. That allows for you to be successful, and that'll in general allow for the workplace, everybody in the workplace to be successful as well. Okay, Lexi, can you go to the next one? And then just a final word on expectations, but this time on your part. Yeah, so these are things that employers should reasonably expect from you. You as an employee are expected to be on time. That's just being respectful to both your supervisors and to your coworkers who are hard at work, coming in on time. So yeah, coming on time. Another thing that was brought up to me that I should mention, you should avoid being any kind of intoxicated while on the job. And that's just another, again, a show of respect for not only supervisors, but everybody you're working with. If you're coming in under the influence of something, you're not I guess you're just not giving the proper respect to the process of your work, basically. And then finally, you should also make sure that you're following the dress code. Again, just another matter of respect. And for some workplaces, following the dress code is part of keeping you, your coworkers, and like the people you serve. So like, for example, in food service, I used to work as a part of Michigan Dining, like having your uniform the way it should be makes everybody safe as well. So that's also going into that expectation of maintaining safety in the workplace. So yeah, dress codes are more important than you might think. Okay, and so yeah, with all of that said, if you could please verbalize or use the chat, what are some expectations that you believe employers have for you? And again, you can call on like what I was just discussing or the things that we've covered in previous professional development sessions. Yeah, communicating well. That's a good one, Dora. Thank you. Yep, your employer should expect you to communicate effectively. Andrew, nice, good attitude, for sure. Yes, yeah, being on time, being respectful, all of those things, yeah. Another way of putting it is like, if you don't do these things, then like, where are you gonna be, right? So that, yeah, these are good, guys. Yeah, being efficient, yeah, that's very good, Jamie. Always
I think
want to
someone
be.
also said respect too.
Yes, Tyler, yeah. Always want to be respectful. Yeah, asking questions. Yeah, that's a good one, Jack. And that's an underrated one, I think, because if you don't ask enough questions, then you might not know exactly what your like supervisor wants out of something you're doing, and then like you might finish and you're not, that's another conversation, but that's a great one. Willing to learn and improve. Yep. We should all always be striving for that. Okay. Thank you guys for that.
Can I jump in on this one, Drew?
Of course.
Oh, and flexibility is another good one that I just saw pop up. So we talked about with the Tuesday group, one of the things that I brought up is all of these expectations, being prepared, these things that you kind of see your employer expecting from you, right? That you're going to be respectful, that you're going to work when you say that you're working, that you're adhering to the dress code, that you're behaving appropriately and showing up on time. You've also stated some expectations that you have of your employer and the workplace, right? Y'all talked about safety, y'all talked about wanting to be able to collaborate, have friends, and have good communication in the workplace. In the work that I do, we kind of we talk about someone having a job as the employment relationship, right? And we use that word relationship intentionally because it is an exchange, right? Where you have a set of expectations for what your workplace is going to be like. Your employer has these expectations for you. And if either person in that relationship violates those expectations, that's when we start to either get less engaged or, like one of the expectations that I don't think made it to our word cloud was that you all probably have is like, you expect you're going to get paid, right? Like after you work and you put in the hours, you expect you're going to get a paycheck. Now, I can, think to my previous experience, I found it harder to be respectful the week that my supervisor told me that they messed up on my payroll and I wasn't going to get paid on time, right? So that's not saying that it was justified of me to feel that way, but just to provide more on that expectations piece.
Thank you, Joe. Lexi, can move to the next one. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about sexual harassment. All right, first I'll define it as it is in the slide as unwelcome and inappropriate sexual remarks and physical advances. And the main point I want to make about this is that it can take place in many different ways, including some that you might not immediately think of as being sexual harassment. And with that point, I want to point you to the iceberg graphic on the left. Interesting thing about an iceberg is that it's mostly underwater. So like the vast majority of it we can't see. So the metaphor here is that all of these behaviors that are under the water, the part that we don't see, all these behaviors are sexual harassment, but they are things that we might not immediately consider to be sexual harassment, or at least some people might. But the main point I want to make here, I don't want to lose this, is that they are all instances of sexual harassment. So things like unwanted sexual discussions are in fact sexual harassment, but it's something that some people might not immediately consider. So like, for instance, if I'm just in the break room and a couple people are having a conversation about, their sex lives or something like that, something inappropriate, something that makes me uncomfortable is the point I want to make. That is making the workplace less inclusive and less equitable because I'm uncomfortable in it. And then another one is asking somebody persistently for a date. That can make that person uncomfortable and make it so that they might not want to be in the workplace as much as they used to want to be. And that's going to affect their work and everybody's work, right? So yeah, and then, yeah, I covered all of that. And then, okay, one final thing that I wanted to make sure that I cover is just like how this stuff can take place in the virtual setting. Since some of you will be doing work and it will be virtual, you should know going into it what behaviors might be sexual harassment. So, and Joe, feel free to jump in on these as I describe them. One of those is being, so your supervisor should not like persistently ask you to meet somewhere outside of your virtual setting. And if you allow me to explain a little bit more, there might be some reason to do this at times, like picking things up from an office or, I'm not sure what the other instances are, but there might be a very good reason to like meet outside. But if they're being very persistent about it, or if they're asking in a way that you are uncomfortable with, then then you shouldn't do that. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. So I think what Drew's getting at is, we have those situations where things are like purely related to the work, right? Like it's pretty reasonable for, if you're starting a new job, your supervisor may want to have lunch with you for the first time, right? Just to, share a meal, get to know you. If they wanted to have lunch with you weekly, like I would say in the general sense, like as long as that's being done in a socially distant way, like, that isn't necessarily harassment. Now, if they start to say like, I'd like to have lunch with you 3 times a week, and I want you to wear that blue sweater that you wore in our meeting last week every time. Like, I know this is like, it's creepy to even think about or talk about, but when you start to feel like that it's becoming less about work and more about a relationship that someone is trying to create with you that you don't want, then it kind of leans more to harassment.
Thank you, Joe. And then another one I wanted to discuss was, supervisor or coworkers shouldn't be asking overly invasive questions just in general. So these could be about your background, like your background, and like that could get into, oh, where do you live, or anything like that. If they're trying to get information that you are not comfortable, giving, that is an instance of harassment as well. And then finally, your supervisor or coworker should not be asking you for something in return for money or promotion or anything that like would seem to benefit you in that. Sorry, I'm stumbling around trying to explain that because it's, like I said, it's all uncomfortable material.
So what Drew's talking about is there's this thing that we use when we talk about harassment and when we talk about HR, and you've probably heard it once before. It's called quid pro quo, and it's, like a lot of like Latin terms that people use to talk about work and laws. What it means is this for that. So this for that, quid pro quo sexual harassment is, if a coworker or a supervisor were to say, I'm going to put in a good word for you with that promotion if you go to dinner with me on Thursday, right? Like that kind of thing is unacceptable. Whereas one of the reasons that we may consider that to be either above or below the iceberg is because initially, and you'll have to pardon me for using the language that's here on this chart, but when we think about sexual harassment, we think about sexual assault. We know very clearly that that is harassment. These things that are less obvious, that are more insidious, that can really wear away at someone's ability to feel like a person and feel comfortable doing their jobs. Those are all things like harassment. So.
Thank you, Joe. So yeah, the final thing we have for you on this slide is a brief Google quiz. I promise it's not going to feel like school. It's very short. I'm going to drop the link to that in the chat now. And this is just to really check your learning. Yes, 3 questions. And in a second, yeah, thank you, Lexi, for getting over to there. Oh, and also please let me know if you have trouble getting to it or something like that. But yeah, this is basically just to check your learning and maybe circle back to things that we might need to explain a little bit more. There we go. All right, so we got one person who's done it, and it seems like they've got a good handle on what we've been discussing so far. But for the first one, just what are some things employers are expecting from you? Yeah, you got it. You should be doing all of these things. So having appropriate behavior, being on time, following the dress code, all of that is important. So you chose all of the above. Very good. Not had anybody get that wrong yet. Nice. So which of these inappropriate behaviors is above the iceberg? So again, behavior that's above the iceberg is behavior that is explicitly, people without a doubt call it sexual harassment. And you guys have gotten that for the most part, for sure. And something, yeah, to reiterate, all of the behaviors on there are sexual harassment. So technically, for us, they're above the iceberg. But yeah, that is to say you guys gotten that pretty good. Go ahead, yeah. And then for the third one, yeah, some ways that sexual harassment can take place in a virtual setting. Yep, all of the above. I discussed, I think, all 3 of these. Supervisor asking you to meet them somewhere, that can be fine, but in some cases, it's not. And then asking overly invasive questions, we've covered that, and quid pro quo. Yeah, you guys got all. It looks like you're retaining this stuff, getting through to you, so that's good. That is good to see. Okay. And now let me get back to. Okay. So yeah, nice job on the quiz, guys. Next, we are gonna, yep, thank you, Lexi, talk about discrimination. So to define it, can be defined as taking inappropriate action against a person based on their social identity. And just for some examples of what a social identity is, they're the aspects of yourself that comprise who you are. So things like race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, ability, and a few others. Let's see, let's go down. And then, like sexual harassment, discrimination can take place in many forms, and it can often go unaddressed if it's not brought up, if it's not reported. And it's also detrimental to the workplace because it creates an environment that isn't inclusive or equitable. And so you're not allowing everybody in the workplace to work at their very best collectively. So, and then just to cement this a little bit more, I'll give an example from my own work experience. 1 second. I worked for a nonprofit organization when I was an undergrad, and we were in the office, and it was one of those days where I had let my hair, I wore my hair just out, wore it down. I've been growing my hair, for context, for a good 3 years or so, something like that. But anyway, I was wearing my hair down, and one of my coworkers, someone who I consider to be like very nice, in general, a cool person, she decides to compliment my hair and touches it, kind of like just like that, and that made me uncomfortable. For the rest of the day, it was just, I just had a weird, like, just uncomfortable feeling hanging over me, and yeah, it can affect your work. And these are things that happen all the time in workplaces just across the world. And they're not okay. So like, these are behaviors that we should strive to rid our workplaces of. And part of your role is making sure that we're like stepping in and reporting these instances of behavior so that we can maintain our ideal workplace. Okay, we can go to the next one. All right. So a question for you guys, just to prime your thinking for the next stuff we have. What are some ways that we could address harassment and discrimination in the workplace? What are some ideas you have now? Again, you can verbalize or you can place it in the chat. Yeah, Brandon, yep, you can talk to a supervisor. Joe will get into more about like other ways to report behavior.
Speaking up when feeling uncomfortable.
Yep. Yeah, definitely advocate for yourself. I think that's something like we don't do enough of for ourselves in general. It's just advocating for ourselves. Keeping your own record. That's a good idea.
Informing other employees, like, y'all are getting this training today and you're going to have an idea of what's acceptable and what's not. Helping your colleagues know that too. Yeah, if it's something that can't be verbally said or communicated, or write it down, right? Record it when it happens. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. These are all like great starts, great ideas, and Joe's going to get a little bit more into what like some of that stuff looks like. Tyler, yeah, yeah, that's definitely something we can do. Just to talk to people and make sure we don't do perpetuate behaviors that they've experienced. So yeah, I'll hand it off to Joe now and get into reporting behavior.
Yeah. I also saw watch for when other people feel uncomfortable too, and that's a really great connection into what we're going to talk about now. So we're going to talk about reporting. Now, when we think about reporting, I want to throw the question out to y'all, and just think about it. How do you know when you've done something wrong, or when you've made a mistake? A lot of times, the only reason that we know that something we've done is wrong is because we've been either kind of socialized to know that it's wrong, or someone directly tells us, or we see signs of someone being uncomfortable at what we've just done. Maybe, again, maybe someone just directly tells us that it's not something that we should be doing. Reporting behavior is really important for making sure that we have an inclusive and equitable work environment, because we make lots of decisions every day based on what we see, what we experience, what we hear, when we're in a public place and or at work, what we hear and what we decide to do with that information, right? At U of M, I am what is considered a mandatory reporter. So if I hear anything that would indicate that someone is in danger, or that someone is experiencing the kind of harm that we're talking about today, it's my job to report it, to let someone know that it happened. And one of the reasons that we do that, if we talked about safety a little while ago. Some of you might have heard the term near miss at some point. When I think about a near miss in terms of physical safety, when I worked at Culver's, if I was working and I saw a puddle of water on the floor, right, just a big old puddle, I see it, I walk around it, maybe I'm too busy, I choose not to say anything about it or tell anyone. I walk past the puddle and 5 seconds later, I hear someone slip and fall and get hurt. Now, the question that has to come to mind, right, is, am I responsible for that person falling? Now, there's different ways to look at that, but there are a lot of things I could have done. I could have reported directly to my supervisor that there was a puddle. I could have stood over the puddle and said, like, hey, everyone, there's a puddle here. I could have put out a wet floor sign, right? Those are examples with physical safety, but I'm hoping you get the idea of when we see something and we don't report it, when we see someone who is dishing out uncomfortable comments or who is saying like racist things or showing other people pornography in the workplace, if we're not reporting that, then in some way we're contributing to that still happening. Now, safety is part of that too for your personal safety. I think someone mentioned, like informing other people. How you keep yourself safe while you're doing that is important too. So work within your own bounds, right? Especially if you're the person that is receiving harm. So the general way that goes is when a behavior occurs, we should know who it is that we can report to. So in most cases, that's going to be your supervisor, pretty much all cases. And I would say that when you start your job, asking who do I report to if I see something happen, or if I see discrimination happen, who do I tell about that stuff? That's as important as asking where the bathroom is in your first day. So if it's not your supervisor, it's going to be a trusted peer. It's going to be someone in HR like myself. But there will be someone in your workplace that is kind of designated to handle those things. Now, the complicated question there is, if my supervisor is the person doing these things, who do I talk to? Again, like that's a really hard situation. And there's always going to be someone else in your workplace, either a trusted peer, in some cases, like your boss's boss, right? If your supervisor is harassing you and you've experienced that, like if you've met that other person, like absolutely, or even if you haven't. But who you can report to depends on your workplace. So there should be a designated person, and you can report your supervisor if they're behaving inappropriately. That's a big thing, right? I'm going to try to be mindful of my time here, but there's the concept of power that a supervisor has over a person. It can be really hard to speak out when you're on the receiving end of that. But it's important that we do report it when it happens. Otherwise, that other person that supervisor is reporting to that supervisor may be going through the same thing, and we just don't know. We can go to the next slide. So we're going to take a minute to talk about bystander intervention. So another way to maintain an inclusive environment where everyone feels welcome, everyone feels safe, is to intervene when these situations happen. And we're going to talk about some strategies that you can use to do that. So for this, I'm going to use kind of a scenario. So imagine that you're at work, you're in a team meeting, you're talking about how to kind of distribute out all of these tasks for your current project. You start talking about who's going to do the spreadsheet calculations. I know that's really vague, but who's going to do the spreadsheet calculations before we get back together next week? Ben, one of your coworkers, suggests that June has shared with you that her family emigrated to the US from China. Ben says that June should do it because she's, quote, probably good with numbers. So you see that happen, you're feeling uncomfortable, you sense some discomfort. What can we do, right? Because as we've talked about microaggressions, this may not be something that, Ben didn't use a racial slur or anything like that, but Ben has basically said something really harmful that over time, someone hearing these things can really affect how they feel about themselves and how they feel about their work. So we should do something. We're going to give you 4 options. The 5th option is do nothing, and I'm going to challenge you to never do nothing. So the first option is direct, and that is directly addressing the person who has made an inappropriate comment. Oh, and Drew is putting the scenario in the chat if you didn't catch it when I said it. Thank you, Drew. So direct is directly addressing the person. So this is basically looking at Ben and saying, Ben, that felt like a harmful thing to say. Or Asking the question directly to Ben in the moment. Ben, can you explain what you meant by that? Or, it doesn't even have to be those words. And the thing that's the hardest about being direct is finding the words sometimes. As many times as I can think of when I've spoken up, I can think of just as many, if not more times, where I really wish I would have. But that's why these other strategies are there. So if you can't find the words in the moment, then you can do something like delay, right? Delay is waiting until after the situation has happened after the team meeting, basically, to check up on that individual and just determine what should be done next. So in delaying, that's going up to June after the meeting and saying, something as simple as, are you okay? If you want to, kind of give more context, you could say, I saw what happened back there. How are you doing? Or I'm sorry for not speaking up. How are you doing? What I can tell you with some honesty is that with people that I've worked with that have experienced that, like situations like this a lot, sometimes they don't want to hear that you're sorry for not speaking up. They're just hoping that you'd speak up. But checking in with them, again, like having them know that you've got their back in some way is important too. The next one is distract. And distract is kind of difficult in this situation because distracting is really just trying to stop the situation from happening by disrupting it or getting the attention of the people involved. So maybe Ben, you've heard Ben say some things like this before, and Ben starts talking, June should do it because she's probably, and you just kind of cut in and say like, June should do it because she's probably ready for a new challenge, right? Or June should do it because she talked to me about it a couple days ago and that's what she wants to do. Those little things that can just kind of like cut that off before that harm happens. The one thing with distract is if this is like a more like drawn out conversation, if someone is being direct on their own behalf, there's nuance to this, but sometimes it's better to not cut in and take their autonomy away from them, right? If someone is defending themselves, they don't always need someone to jump in, but you can be there for them. You can support them in that. So distract, again, can be kind of hard to do, but it's a little bit of improv. It's cutting things off with something distracting. Yeah. And then delegate is the last one. It's really just asking for help. So if you know someone you can trust that is capable of handling these situations, I'll use the example that I used on Tuesday. I was out in town a while back, and I saw this couple that I was reading the body language, and the man was getting just slowly getting more aggressive in his body language towards the woman as I was kind of approaching from further away. I saw him kind of like grab her arm really aggressively. And in the moment, like I was about to freeze, and then I saw that there was another person that was kind of walking up too, and I just made this knowing eye contact with them, and like we did a little wave, and so we walked up together and just kind of said like, hey, is everything okay? And so we were able to be direct because we delegated to each other. We knew something was happening. We may not have spoken up if we weren't able to find someone to support in that. Delegate also can be going to your supervisor or, in like after the moment saying like delegating, reporting is delegating in a way. It's saying something happened and I'm not really sure what to do about it. What should we do? Yeah, that's it on that one.
You can skip that one, Lexi.
So addressing harm, we're all going to mess up at some point, right? Like, as I've said, I'm a white dude. I grew up in a pretty homogenous community, a community of a lot of people that looked like me, that talked like me. And so when I came over to U of M, I had a lot to learn. And honestly, I probably caused some harm in that learning. When we do mess up, once it's done, it's done, right? The relationship, sometimes it can be repaired, sometimes it can't. And that's something that we just kind of have to be okay with when we do cause harm to someone. So when we do cause harm, we need to start by apologizing and doing that in a way that is sincere. With that, body language is very important, right? There's a big difference between me walking up to someone and saying, you know, I'm really sorry that I misgendered you earlier, versus me just being like, sorry, I called you the wrong name. You know, like there's the eye contact. There's, you know, like if I'm standing there crossing my arms and looking like I'm apologizing because I have to, not because I want to, those can send different messages. So apologize in a way that shows that you mean it. If your coworker is willing, maybe having a conversation with them about the harm that's caused, and listen to what they have to say. I've experienced both sides of this in terms of, you know, where I've seen harm caused and someone just doesn't want to talk about it anymore, right? Like we talked a little bit about what's happening in the country right now. And like, if you cause harm to someone, it's not their responsibility to educate you on why, right? That's a big discussion that's happening right now of like folks that have experienced a lot of the things that are, you know, a lot of the racism that's happening in our country. Like white folks like myself, we got to do our own research, right? There's a lot of stuff out there for us to learn about why what we do is wrong sometimes. We don't need to necessarily make someone relive the trauma of the situation to understand and learn from it. So if they're willing to have a conversation and you have that friendship with them, that relationship, go for it. And if you don't understand why what happened has caused harm, you know, one of the great things about the program that you're in, and one thing that I admittedly forgot to mention earlier with reporting is, yeah, I'm getting a knowing face from someone right now. You know, you have these success coaches, you have these mentors, you have all these people that are supporting you right now that you can report things to, you can ask questions to, especially in these situations where, you know, you had an interaction with someone that just didn't go well, or, you know, it felt off, or it felt like you caused harm. Ask your success coaches about that, and they'll be able to help you kind of navigate that. And then the final thing is that we're not the judge of what harms someone else, right? Just because you think it's a joke, just because you think it's harmless, just because you think it's okay, how someone experiences what you say and what you do is how they experience it, right? Like, again, everyone has a different set of experiences that they're working from. And we have to understand that we're not always going to totally understand where someone's coming from. The final thing is on closure. When we cause harm, what we want to do as people is, like, our brains are wired to solve problems. Our hearts are wired to create connection. And we are always trying to solve problems when we make them, right? So when you wrong someone, there's going to be this feeling of, I have to fix this. I have to do something about this. Sometimes that trust is just not going to be repaired, and that's something that, you know, you have to be aware of, right? We can apologize, we can follow steps, and, you know, it might be that we've made the microaggression that this person has heard one too many times, and they just don't trust us anymore. And so sometimes there's not going to be closure in that, and I just want to get that out there. So sometimes it's best to just apologize and move on.
Okay, so now that we've gone through a lot of this material and this content, I think it's about time we put it into practice. So we're gonna do one scenario as a large group together, and we'll discuss it. And when we discuss it, think about what the 4Ds might look like in each of these, or in our scenario, and then think about what does reporting look like in that situation. So yeah, we can. Oh, and then I'll mention real quick, because I like this point, the action hero awareness. Sometimes, yeah, we do overestimate how we might respond. So it's good to kind of visualize these situations and discuss some real steps that you can take, so that if you are in that situation, at the very least, you've put some time to think about it, and time to think about like what those steps are. So, okay, with that, let's go to the first one. And if I could have somebody read it for me once it comes up. Perfect. Yeah, so if I could have somebody read the first scenario for me, and then we'll have a discussion. And not all at once.
This is that participation I was talking about, y'all.
Okay, I guess.
I can.
Thank
Never
you.
mind.
There we go.
All right, I can read. Your office has recently hired an employee who utilized they/them pronouns. They input data for a project that you are working on. While you are reviewing the work, you discover that they made a very simple error that could have ruined the project had you not caught it. Not remembering the name, you shout out, "Hey man, this is not right at all." You feel like it's a meaningless statement, but when they walk back to the station, they look sad. You find out later that they were deeply bothered by this remark. What are some approaches to addressing the harm caused?
Thank you, Christabel. So yeah, we have this scenario where somebody's been misgendered, and yeah, so now you can either verbalize or add it to the chat, like what the 4Ds look like in this situation and what reporting behavior might be. So yeah, Josette, you could directly intervene in this situation. You could be a bystander and you could say, hey, like this wasn't right. Like, yeah, you know that they go by they, them pronouns. You shouldn't misgender them that way. Or yeah, if you were the one who caused the harm and you realize in that moment, you can go directly to them and apologize. And like Joe talked about before, you might not get closure from that, but you should still make the effort to apologize in that moment. What would reporting behavior look like? Who is somebody that we could go to in that situation?
I would say probably go directly to the person and try to talk it out. You know, try to tell them that you didn't mean it no harm so they can understand, because, you know, sometimes it can be like a misunderstanding. And, you know, yeah, apologize from the heart and not just doing it because it seems right.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Ariel. Yeah, you need to be sincere and genuine with your apology. Yeah, for sure.
So if we kind of change the perspective on this and we take the role of someone who is seeing this happen, right? Like maybe like you're stepping into the shoes of a coworker who just like saw you do this thing to this person. You know, what do some of these strategies look like? I mean, someone mentioned direct already, and that was great. What does delay look like if you're this kind of observer?
And you could answer this too by just like either put in the chat or verbalizing what it means to delay responding in general. And that might kind of help your thinking as to how this might look in this situation. Addison, all right. Talk to them after the incident and check up on how they feel. Yep, that's a good approach.
Yeah, I mean that's delay, right? That's you know, not necessarily doing something in the moment, but following up with that person afterwards to make sure they're okay. Yeah. How about distract? What might distract look like? And again, we talked about this being kind of tough.
Yeah, it is hard to come up with something for distract because I have a hard time myself thinking about how I could, I guess, like as a bystander, like do something in that situation because it's happening so fast.
I would
And,
say maybe just like kind of continue on with like the station, maybe to distract from that. Like I don't know how to really
So just like kind of like keep like kind of work through it in a way, or like not keep talking about it. Talk to the victim about something else, right? I think that's kind of what you're getting at in some ways is what I didn't mention with distract that is a tactic is just like pulling someone away from a situation where they've been harmed, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. And how about delegate? What does delegating look like in this situation?
And again, this one might be tough too, but just in general, try to think about just the fact that reporting in general is kind of delegating. And you can also like look at the people around you too. Yeah, that's perfect. Informing the supervisor and having them intervene in that situation.
Talking to someone else who's been misgendered in order to get a better understanding on how to fix the problem. So I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes and, right? Like yes and, like as we kind of talked about before, like you know, if we've caused harm, if you know someone who has experienced that and they've shared that with you, you know, maybe that's a good conversation to have, right? Like I saw this and I didn't do anything about it. Like, what would you have wanted if this was happening to you at work? But remember, we want to avoid, if we can, like putting someone on the spot to talk about something that was traumatic or harmful for them. So I'm going to say yes. That's a good approach, and make sure that relationship is there. Yeah.
Tell your that's a good one.
And I'm going to yes and that one too. I feel bad, but I you know, when we see something happen like this, like it can be kind of personal, right? So telling your supervisor and reporting it to your supervisor, y'all have probably played telephone before, the game where you pass along a message to one person and they pass it to the next person, they pass it to the next person. You know, when something happens that causes harm, whether that's something that is sexual harassment or something discriminatory, it's best to kind of not spread the word on what happened, right? If that person wants to tell people about what happened, that's their choice, and they're totally open to doing that. But we don't want to do that for them, if that makes sense. So, thank you, Tyler.
Thank you for that, Joe. Okay.
Can I add something really quick?
Of course, Jordan.
Okay. I guess I have 2 points. So the first thing is, like, when, you know, we were talking a lot about, well, what happens if I'm the person that caused harm? And so folks were saying, you know, you should apologize to this person, which is true. But one point I just want to bring up is you also don't want to over apologize. So, you know, an example of that might be like, you go to a person, you sincerely apologize for, in this case, you know, not using the correct pronouns or misgendering someone. You wouldn't want to go up to them the next day or later that day and do something like, oh my God, you know, I'm so sorry that I did that, and I've been feeling so bad about it, and I just really wish I never would have said that to you, because it's also not that person's responsibility, just like we all should, you know, work to educate ourselves on these issues. It's not that person's responsibility to make us feel better about the mistake that we made. And so absolutely make sure you give a sincere apology, but don't overdo it and expect that person to kind of, you know, alleviate some of the discomfort that you might be feeling after you made that mistake. So I wanted to say that. The other thing, particularly in this case, for folks who are trans or non-binary, this, like, Joe said, it can be deeply personal. And so you also want to try to be mindful of which of the 4Ds you use, because they're not equally appropriate depending on the situation, right? And so especially if you know about the person and how they appreciate things being addressed. So if this were me and somebody used the direct approach and called that out right in a meeting, like, hey, so-and-so, like, you just misgendered this person, and kind of made a bigger scene out of it like that, you could potentially create a bigger issue out of it, right? And so they're not all equal in every situation. So you do, it's hard, but you want to think about some of those things.
Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. That was a great addition. Because all of these situations are, they require different approaches depending on what is going on. So, yeah, definitely. Okay, so for the next couple scenarios, we're gonna go into breakout rooms, and you'll have a staff in there to help facilitate these with you. Make sure to keep in mind, like when you read them, that trying to get what the 4Ds would look like in that situation, and keeping in mind what Jordan discussed, what approaches would be appropriate in that situation, and then also like what reporting behavior looks like. So yeah, with that, we'll split up into breakout rooms.
I am working on that, so one moment, y'all. Sit tight, maybe ask some questions of Drew and Joe. Talk amongst yourselves.
So it might be good to just review what the 4Ds are before we break into those small groups while Lexi works on those. Can someone give me one of the 4Ds?
Direct.
Direct,
Oh.
yes. This one.
Delay.
Delay.
Say delegate.
Yeah.
Yep, delegate up in the chat. Distract, yes, there it is. Nice.
Yeah, you guys are on top of that. I know the last group, what they came away with the most, it seems like, was like these intervention strategies. So hopefully it appears like they're resonating with you guys too, which is good.
And we didn't spend much time talking about the bystander effect. For those of you who have taken like a psych class or anything like that, you've probably heard a little bit about it. But basically, like, there's this show, I can't remember what it's called, but there's clips of it on YouTube where they show, they set people up in these situations where they had these actors doing something like the stuff that we talked about. What would you do? There we go, yeah. They, I think everyone's heard of it. But basically they film these strangers walking by these situations and, see like what they did, and then follow up with them after they either intervened or walked away, and just like ask them about it. So like, if you're interested in seeing like what this looks like in practice, or you're kind of wondering, how am I going to react in these situations? That's a good, thing to look at and just kind of see some examples.
All right, great time to transition. So I'm going to go ahead and open up all of the breakout rooms, and then we'll come back together to debrief, probably with maybe 8 to 10 minutes left in the session. I'll send out a blast so the facilitators know it's time. But yeah, please go to your breakout room in one moment.
Are we doing scenarios 2 and 3 right now?
Yes, Dave.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Drew.
Okay. So
Let's
can I
see.
make myself not the host, or how does that work?
If
Oh,
you
make
click, oh, perfect.
okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh,
All right, I'll see you in a sec.
yep.
Oh, do I need to send you back?
Oh wait, I think I can.
It says I muted everyone. If I did that, I didn't mean to, but can one of you make sure you can unmute yourself? Okay, perfect. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it. Clearly, our group is just the most on top of it because no one else is back yet.
Okay, is everybody back?
Not quite, almost though, I think.
Okay.
All right, I think that's almost everyone. So go for it, Drew. Welcome back, everyone.
All right, guys. So we have a debrief here. So like just considering all the stuff that we've talked about in this workshop, all the discussions that you hopefully had in your small groups. I'll have just one question for you. What resonated with you the most during this workshop? And again, either verbalizing or in the chat with your responses. 4Ds, yep. Yep, tangible strategies to intervene in like workplace misbehavior, for sure. I definitely wanted you guys to come away with that. Yeah, just like being able to define what sexual harassment is and just gaining some more insight into like the different ways that it can look. Yeah, that's another something we want you guys to come away with. Reporting behavior, yeah, very important. Yeah, I often feel like people don't like know that they can report things, that they can say things if they're uncomfortable at the workplace. So yeah, definitely important for you guys to come away with that. Iceberg graphic is helpful. Yeah, yeah, that's like something that even I'd come away with now. Like at my next job, maybe I'll ask, or no, I will ask like who I can go to if like I feel uncomfortable, if I've been harmed. Yeah, and then knowing which is the appropriate approach. That's something I like learned today too. I thank Jordan for like bringing that up. Like these are all great strategies, but some of them might not be the best in the situation that's occurred. So you really got to use some good judgment there. But still, you want to say something. You want to like do something in order to make your workplace equitable and inclusive and all of those good things. Okay. All right, guys. So I think the last slide, if you guys have any questions. Oh, I'm sorry. I totally forgot. Okay. Yeah, these are our objectives. So hopefully, like with all of this, everything we've covered, hopefully now you can define what an ideal workplace environment is. And as I go on through these objectives, like if you can kind of like answer these, you know, put what we're looking for like in the chat. So like for instance, I can define what an ideal workplace environment is. If you want to like show that you can do that in the chat, that'd be great as I go through these. So yeah, we covered that. We covered you should be able to define what sexual harassment and racial discrimination is, and also understand that it can take place in many different forms, and what your role is in stopping those situations and maintaining inclusive and equitable workplace. Yeah, you got a lot of different tangible strategies for doing that. You know that you can report behavior in the workplace now and who you can go to for that. And like, you know, that maintaining an inclusive and equitable workplace makes it so that everybody in the workplace can work to the best of their ability. And that's something that like you should strive for. You should be able to define what is expected of you in the workplace. I think like we drill that into you guys pretty well. So yeah, you should be able to do that. You should be able to define what the process is for reporting inappropriate behavior in the workplace. Yeah, like I said, it's a very important thing to do in the workplace, and just wanted to make sure that you guys knew that you can do that. You have that right. And then finally, you should be able to identify strategies for intervening in workplace misconduct and for like addressing harm. And just based off of the breakout rooms and like the responses you've had in the chat, it seems like you guys have come away with that. So yeah, and then I think the next slide is questions. Okay, so yeah, if you guys have any questions, that's our presentation. Yeah, if you have questions, you can stay on after this, or you can like make an appointment in the office hours for all the success coaches. I want to thank Joe for facilitating with us today. He was great. So yeah, thank you, Joe. And thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, thank you all so much for your time. You know, again, like this is not an easy thing to talk about, especially now. And as you advance through your careers and get different jobs, you're going to see workplaces handle these things in different ways. And so I think that first I can is really important. Like know what you want to see in a workplace so that you can advocate for yourself.
Yeah, and can we all just like give Joe a clap reaction or something real quick? I do really just want to thank him. He is not a summer work staff person, so he has a whole other full-time job, and he took 90 minutes out of his day twice this week to come and talk with all of us, and also all of the work that he did to prepare the presentation with Drew. So thank you, Joe. We appreciate you.
And yeah, we will be around if any of you have any additional questions or anything, whether it's about this content or about programming stuff or deliverables. But if you do not have any questions, you are free to go. Have a great weekend.